Dismembered before the crowd. August 23rd, 1305. Smithfield, London. William Wallace was being dragged through the streets behind a horse. England had spent nearly a decade trying to capture him. A Scottish noble named John de Menteith had finally betrayed him. For money. Wallace was tied to a wooden hurdle and pulled through London toward the execution ground at Smithfield. The route stretched nearly 6 miles. Crowds lined the streets as the procession passed. Some shouted insults, others threw garbage and struck him with sticks. By the time he reached the execution ground, he was bleeding and barely able to stand. Soldiers hauled him onto a wooden scaffold and tied his arms and legs. The crowd pressed forward around the platform. Guards formed a tight ring around the prisoner. Then, the punishment began. A rope was placed around Wallace's neck and he was lifted from the platform. His body jerked as the rope tightened. Moments later, he was lowered again, before death could occur. He was still conscious. The executioner stepped forward with a knife. He castrated Wallace first. Then he cut open his abdomen and pulled out his intestines while he was still alive. The organs were thrown into a fire burning beside the scaffold. The crowd stood only a few feet away. Next, the executioner removed his heart. William Wallace died on the scaffold at Smithfield. His head was cut off and dipped in tar. It was placed on a spike on London Bridge. His body was cut into 4 pieces and sent to Newcastle, Berwick, Stirling, and Perth. The remains were displayed in different cities as a warning to anyone who resisted English rule. Cut down in shallow water, April 27th, 1521. Mactan Island, Philippines. Ferdinand Magellan was leading a Spanish expedition through the Philippine Islands. Several local rulers had accepted Spanish authority and converted to Christianity. But one chieftain refused. A leader named Lapu-Lapu rejected Spanish control and refused to submit. Magellan decided to confront him directly. Before dawn, he sailed toward the island of Mactan with about 60 armored soldiers. The boats stopped far from shore. Coral reefs blocked the landing. The soldiers had to wade the rest of the distance through shallow water while carrying armor, muskets, and crossbows. Hundreds of warriors were already waiting on the beach. Magellan ordered his men forward. They pushed through knee-deep water toward the shore. Muskets fired, but many shots failed in the damp air. Crossbows were slow to reload. Arrows and spears began striking the Spanish line. The formation started to break. One arrow struck Magellan in the right leg. He staggered, but stayed on his feet. He ordered his men to retreat to the boats while he and a few soldiers held the line. The warriors saw he was wounded. They moved toward him from several directions. A blow struck his helmet and knocked it sideways. Another strike tore the helmet from his head. Then, a bamboo spear drove into his face. Magellan fell into the water. His remaining soldiers were already pulling back toward the boats. Warriors closed around him and continued striking with spears and blades. Ferdinand Magellan died in the surf at Mactan. His body was never recovered. His ships sailed away without him, leaving the commander behind on the beach where he fell, drowned in his own blood. Year 453 A.D. Pannonia. Attila, ruler of the Huns, was one of the most feared leaders in Europe. Roman territories had paid him tribute to avoid attack. That night, he was celebrating a new marriage. Inside a wooden hall, Attila held a feast with his warriors. Food and wine were carried to the tables late into the night. When the celebration ended, he withdrew to a private chamber with his new bride, a young woman named Ildiko. The doors closed. Guards remained outside. Nothing seemed unusual. By morning, Attila had not emerged. The guards forced the door open and entered the room. Attila was lying on his back in the bed. Blood covered his face and chest. Ildiko sat nearby, crying. There were no wounds on his body, no sign of a struggle. During the night, Attila suffered a severe nosebleed. Lying flat on his back, the blood ran down his throat and filled his airway while he slept. He suffocated in the bed beside his bride. His warriors reacted immediately. They cut their own faces with knives so their blood would fall as they mourned. According to accounts of the funeral, the Huns believed a great leader should be honored with blood, not tears. Betrayed in a small boat. September 28th, 48 BC, Egyptian coast. Pompey the Great had just lost a civil war against Julius Caesar. His army was gone. His ships had carried him to Egypt, where he hoped to find protection from the young pharaoh Ptolemy XIII. Pompey waited offshore aboard his warship. From the beach, Egyptian officials sent a small boat to bring him to land. Among the men in the boat was Lucius Septimius, a Roman officer who had once served under Pompey. The familiar face lowered his suspicion. Pompey stepped down into the boat with two attendants. The oars pushed them slowly away from the warship toward the shore. Pompey stood in the center of the boat reading a speech he had prepared in Greek. He planned to present it to the young king. The shoreline grew closer. Then, something changed. Septimius moved behind him. Without warning, he drew his sword and drove it into Pompey's back. Pompey collapsed forward onto the floor of the boat. The other men joined the attack. Blades struck him again and again as the boat drifted in the shallow water. Pompey pulled part of his toga over his face. He said nothing while the stabbing continued. Pompey the Great died inside the small boat before it reached shore. The attackers cut off his head and left the rest of his body on the beach. The head was later presented to Julius Caesar as proof that his rival was dead. When Caesar saw it, witnesses recorded that he turned away and wept. Killed in his own palace, June 26, 1541. Lima, Peru. Francisco Pizarro was the Spanish governor of Peru and the leader who had conquered the Inca Empire. That afternoon, he was inside his palace in Lima. Servants and officers moved through the halls as usual. Outside, a group of armed men was already approaching the entrance. They were followers of Diego de Almagro II. 3 years earlier, Pizarro had ordered the execution of Almagro's father, his former partner in the conquest of Peru. The son and his supporters had come for revenge. The attackers forced their way through the doors. Shouts echoed through the corridors as armed men rushed inside. Servants tried to block the hallway, but were cut down almost immediately. Pizarro heard the commotion and reached for his sword. He stepped into the corridor to meet them. At 63, he was older, but he still fought back. Pizarro struck first. His sword cut down one man, then another. The narrow hallway filled with shouting and the sound of steel. But there were too many of them. The attackers surrounded him and forced him backward across the stone floor. One of them drove a sword into his throat. Pizarro collapsed as blood spread across the floor. He dipped his finger into the blood and drew a cross beside him. Francisco Pizarro died in the hallway of the palace he had built. The attackers ran through the building shouting that Almagro had been avenged. Gold poured into his mouth. 53 BC, near Caria, Mesopotamia. Marcus Licinius Crassus was one of the richest men in Rome. He had marched east with 7 Roman legions seeking a major military victory. The campaign collapsed. Parthian cavalry defeated the Roman army in the open desert. Thousands of soldiers were killed, and the survivors retreated to the city of Carrhae. Soon after, the Parthian commander Surena offered negotiations. Crassus agreed to meet. Roman officers and Parthian riders gathered outside the city walls. The two groups faced each other in a tense circle on the desert plain. Crassus rode forward. As the discussion began, a Parthian soldier suddenly grabbed the reins of Crassus's horse. Roman soldiers moved in to pull him back. The meeting instantly turned violent. Men on both sides began shouting and drawing weapons. In the confusion, a Parthian blade struck Crassus. He fell from the horse into the sand. Marcus Crassus died on the ground outside Carrhae. The Parthians cut off his head and hands after the killing. They then heated gold until it melted and poured it into the severed head's mouth. News of the act spread across Rome soon after the defeat at Carrhae. Surrounded by fire. June 21, 1582. Honnoji Temple, Kyoto. Oda Nobunaga was one of the most powerful warlords in Japan. After years of warfare, he had brought much of the country under his control. That morning, he was staying at Honnoji Temple with only a small group of attendants. Before dawn, thousands of soldiers moved through the streets of Kyoto toward the compound. They were commanded by Akechi Mitsuhide, one of Nobunaga's own generals. The temple was suddenly surrounded. Shouts and gunfire broke the morning silence as Mitsuhide's men forced their way through the gates. Nobunaga's guards rushed to defend the halls, but were quickly overwhelmed. Nobunaga grabbed a bow and joined the fight. Arrows flew through the corridors as attackers pushed deeper into the wooden buildings. One by one, the defenders fell. Then the attackers set the temple on fire. Flames spread across the dry timber and paper walls. Smoke filled the rooms. The exits were blocked by enemy soldiers outside. Nobunaga retreated deeper into the temple. Capture would mean public humiliation. Inside a small inner chamber, he knelt on the floor and drew a short blade. As the fire closed around the building, he drove the blade across his abdomen. Oda Nobunaga died inside the burning temple at Honnoji. When Mitsuhide's soldiers entered the ruins hours later, there was nothing left to identify. No body, no remains, just burned ground where the most powerful man in Japan had been.